What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a new video. Chris here. I'm very excited today because I'm going to be taking you through a piece I was working on very recently, and it's kind of in the style of uplifting Disney music, you know, kind of superhero-like as well. And for the style especially, I really enjoy using Cinesamples libraries, which I'm going to show you today how I incorporate their libraries into my composition. So I'm going to kind of discuss the orchestration and the arrangement a little bit first, and then I'll let you know which libraries I'm using and how they fit within the context of the overall piece. So let's get right into it. Hopefully you've heard the original piece already. If not, the link's in the description box below so you can check it out. And then come back, and that will give you a better context of what's happening around here. So down here you can see these are all the audio tracks that I bounced from the MIDI channels up here. So the MIDI channels will probably be a little bit easier to see just because they're not, you know, the entire length all the way through, whereas the audio files, I didn't really chop them up after that. So these are just the printed versions of the MIDI. But if you take a look here, I'll kind of take you through kind of the structure of this piece. So we have the main theme. Well, first of all, we have the intro. So the intro kind of takes around 4 bars. And then after that, the main theme comes in, and that's this section right here. So I consider this the A section, and it's kind of like with driving ostinatos with the main brass theme, you know. And then the B section, kind of the bridge section, is very short. It's kind of has like sweeping strings, you know, nice and calm. And then the A section comes back. That's a little bit different. So you can call it A prime, for example. And then we have an entirely different C section that kind of modulates even more, does some different stuff, and then finally a variation of the A comes back to finish things off and with a nice big ending, right? So that's kind of a general structure that I like to stick with for this style of piece I'm writing, and it's around 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So let me just play through a little bit and kind of go through the different instruments that I'm focusing on here. So right off the bat, you hear the string ostinato on the top. That's using Cinestrings. And then all the percussion you hear is from Cineperc. So the main brass theme is by the French horns here. B section, we have a nice sweeping passage. Horns come back. Center brass again, of course. So now here comes the C section. Everything turns up the heat a little bit. Big fan of Hollywood Winds with scales. All right, so that was the entire thing. You basically heard a lot of Cinesamples instruments being played there, especially in the main theme. I used the 6 horns. I really like the 6 horns in Cinebrass Core. So I was mainly sticking with the shorter articulations. I pull up the articulations patch, and they take the main theme for the A sections, both in the A section and the A prime, and as well as in the very end when I finish the whole thing. So the reason I don't really use 12 horns as much is because I like to reserve the 12 horns for moments of higher tension and higher energy. So I'd like to use 6 horns just because it kind of strikes a nice balance between the 12 horn section, and the single horn or maybe 2 horns. 6 horns kind of just has a nice balance between those section sizes, and especially for a main theme, I think it has a very nice punchy tone. It still doesn't clog up the mix very much, so that's kind of nice. So I mainly use the articulations patch with the Dennis Sands mix because it has this beautiful tone from the Sony stage, and the mix was done very, very well. At the same time, I layer in the trombone, as you can see underneath of that. So if I drag that up beneath, you can see pretty much the MIDI data is almost identical here. So I layered in the trombones and the horns together to get that melody to really cut through. So if I go down to the audio, this is what you were hearing the whole time. So if I just solo the horns and the trombones, this is what it sounds like. So this trombone staccato is the bass notes there, but let's take that away. So just the horn sounds like this. And then just the trombone sounds like this. So they have kind of a different sound, right? And then when you layer them together, you get this. So very full, very rich. And I also panned them slightly differently. So the horns, I kind of did a touch to the left, and the trombones, I did a bit to the right. So I got some extra width from that combination as well. And those were kind of the 2 features from for Cinebrass. Actually, all of the brass, with the exception of one track, the horns rhythm, are all from Cinebrass. This one's from Berlin Brass, but that was just into layer underneath the main melody there. And then I had some brass chords at the very end just to thicken up that very the last part. So you hear that last chord here. This is part of Cinebrass Pro, I believe. And that's just in there to layer. But the brass basically takes the main melody. In terms of the strings, I use Cinestrings for the shorts mainly. So they have very, very nice punchy shorts. Perfect for ostinato writing. So the really cool thing is that because they have their articulations patches with 3 different lengths of shorts, all you need to do is play very, very lightly, and by default, it will activate the shortest length of short note. So you get the staccatissimo or spiccato sound, which just sounds like this if I solo it. Right, and so there's a number of round robins, so it doesn't sound like it's the same sample being repeated over and over and over. You actually get a more or less realistic sounding ostinato. And then the celli, and the celli I also layered in underneath for an additional rhythm. So I can have that one. Let me see if I can pull it up here in the strings in the audio. Celli ostinato. So this is Cinestrings as well, but it's in the cello section, right? And then, so these are also from Cinestrings. So I have the cello legato as well. Sometimes I enjoy using the more sustained notes, basically because the overall sound really cuts through the mix, and you get a lot of high frequencies. So, when I need moments of more thickness and just more presence in the mix, then Cinestrings really does a good job there. And then another library that they have is the Cinestrings runs, which in combination with Holly Woodwinds is a very effective combination because they both do very similar things. So Cinestrings runs, here, have a listen to this here. So the Cinestrings runs is literally just doing that descending scale, and then it finishes. But then right as I finish that descending scale, the ostinato from Cinestrings, or the violins one, take over once again. And then the ostinato just continues, So it continues the motion, it keeps it going. And here's another scale coming up, 3, 4. And then it just continues there. Okay, so generally I like to have my runs combined. So I like to have the Hollywood winds from Cinesamples as well, combined with the Cinestrings runs, and then I like to place my runs going into moments of climaxes or going into the downbeat of the next bar. So if we just solo the run here, actually let me play it without solo first. So you hear the run going into the downbeat, right? Let's check the audio file down here and see if it was 1 or 2 octaves actually. So that's 2 octaves, right? So it really works because it starts softer actually. When the woodwinds play softer, especially the flute, they tend to start at a softer dynamic. So when they grow, the volume increases, and then it swells really well into the next section. So it sounds like this. And I was trying to be very careful with the balancing as well. So I didn't want the run to overtake everything. I wanted it to kind of sit underneath so you could definitely hear it, but it doesn't, take over the entire thing, because our ear is actually listening to the melody more so. The run is just an additional texture. So in addition to Cinestrings, I also used Hollywood winds quite a bit. These other solo woodwinds are from Berlin. Let's continue along here. So by the way, I at the time of this, the production of this piece, I didn't have Cinewinds core yet, and now I do. So I kind of pick and choose when I want to use Cinewinds versus Berlin in different situations. And the brass here, like I said, is basically all Cine brass. The percussion here is all from Berlin percussion. So, and then we have the piano from Cine piano, and you hear the piano's kind of playing chords. I turned it way down because I didn't want it to overtake anything. So with the glockenspiel, we have the snare you can hear, kind of doing a nice driving rhythm in general. Right. And we have the snare plus tom hit. So that kind of sounds like that. And that's from Cineperk Epic, that one hit there. So I kind of played that once and then looped it over here. The cymbals, those are good to ride into moments of, going into the downbeats. Timpani, exaggerates and emphasizes the root notes a lot of the time, and the bass notes. And then the snare kind of established a fairly standard pattern throughout to keep the driving momentum going forward. So this is all from Cineperk Core. So I have this rim at the same time on the weak beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then we also have the harp plucks and harp glissandi. So let's listen to a couple of these glissandi. Let me go a bit before. So you hear that harp there. Let me just play that one for you. Right? So those are the pre-played or pre-recorded glissandi in Cine harps. And then Cine Orc is one library I really love because it basically glues everything together very nicely. It's basically an orchestral pad library, and it has a legato function as well. So you can play your chords, and anytime you switch the note from one to another, the engine will automatically join the next one, kind of like with a legato function, so it releases the previous one. So let me play this section actually, and I'll turn off Cine Orc first and then add it back in so you can hear what it sounds like. So it's a little bit empty, right? But if I put it in, nice and full. So let me play solo Cine Orc for you and show you what that sounds like. So Cine Orc is pretty cool. It contains major, minor, and I believe it has one more chord type. I believe it's augmented. It doesn't have diminished, unfortunately. Maybe if they update it in the future, it could contain it. But again, that legato function is really cool. And then finally, the choirs are from Metropolis Arc. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So for the majority of the piece, I pretty much use Cinesamples stuff. And again, in the style of Disney, you know, this more uplifting type of music, I tend to turn to the Cinesample stuff first, just because of the upfront sound of the Sony stage. The default mixes that the libraries come with, it's a very, very nice forward sound. So I really enjoy that. You know, the shorts especially are very, very effective. And especially with the brass, like those notes just really come punching through. And I really love layering the brass instruments together, especially the horns and the trombones. And then underneath I have the trumpets doing counter melody, and from Cinebrass Core as well. So that's from the trumpet ensemble. Okay. And yes, and Cineperc is one of my go-to percussion libraries, if not my absolute go-to, because it's so easy to use, and the sound is just there. You don't really have to fiddle too much with it. You just load it in and play, and it's there. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I actually have something for you if you stay to the end of this video. Just check the description box below. I've got a guide for you, completely free, but it's about my personal 10 steps to getting as good of an orchestral sound as possible in your own productions. A lot of the questions I get are like, you know, I'm arranging stuff and it ends up sounding a bit muddy, or the placement doesn't sound quite right, and I'm not sure how to mix certain things. So I've kind of put together my checklist of like my 10 essential things you need to know very well in order to get a good sounding orchestral mix. So check that out. It's completely free to follow along with, and you know, hopefully it helps you in your next orchestral piece. Once again, I'd like to thank Cinesamples for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.